So it's my pleasure to introduce Mark Banks from the Home Office. So Mark has spent much of his career working in crime research, and both at the Home Office and at the ONS as well. So he has worked on analyzing survey data from the Crime Survey of England and Wales, and also working on the survey design. And now he's more specifically in charge at the Home Office of the Commercial Victimisation Surveys.
I'm Mark Banks, a researcher at the Home Office. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the Commercial Victimisation Survey. So we've heard a lot about our wonderful household crime surveys. I'm bringing something slightly different to the room. So a survey that's aimed at measuring crime committed against businesses. So I'm going to talk a bit about, or probably mainly about the findings from the last survey, largely to give you a bit of familiarity with the types of things that the survey covers. And then I am going to talk a little bit about where we are in terms of progress with the survey and next steps. Okay, so just to start with a bit of context and a little bit of background about the Commercial Victimisation Survey. So it was conceived as a way of plugging a gap in the coverage of crime statistics, essentially. So we have some great sources of data about crime against the household population. And we also have police figures which do cover crime against business, but it's quite difficult to disaggregate those crimes against the business population. So the CVS was designed as a way of giving us a discrete set of statistics that looked at crime against business. It's a premises-based survey, and it measures both prevalence and frequency of crime against businesses, and it's specifically for England and Wales. The last survey to run was the 2023 survey with fieldwork between August and November of that year, and that was published last year. And there's been a few changes to the CVS in recent years. The main change was to extend the coverage of the survey from specific sectors of interest. So most of the life of the CVS has just been each year looking at 3 or 4 specific sectors. And in 2022, the coverage of the survey was extended to look across all the sectors and give that broader picture of crime against business. So we have 2 years, fantastic, thank you. We have 2 years of data now looking across all business sectors. The latest report as well, we have because of limits of sample size, and we've gone for that broader picture, we struggle a little bit to break down for specific sectors, but we have been able to do a little bit on the retail and wholesale and retail sector. So I'll talk a little bit about those findings, but that does involve us combining the latest 2 years of data. So I'll flag up where we're doing that. Okay, so let's take a look at the headlines from the latest survey. So I'll talk about 2 main measures here. So prevalence being the proportion of business premises that were victims of crime, and frequency, so how often premises experienced crime, and we measure that according to a categorization where we ask people, we moved away from quantifying the number of incidents, and we asked people instead how often they experienced it, and that could range from responses of once only to several times a day. Okay, so for all commercial premises across the population, around 1/4 experienced a crime in the 12-month reference period. So just for context, that's equivalent of about 400,000 business premises experiencing crime. And that's probably quite difficult to see, but you've got, oh, sorry, yeah, that quarter represented all CVS crime at the top. The most commonly experienced crime was theft, experienced by the 14%. Most of that is theft by customers, representing the influence of the retail sector in our sample there. So you can see there lots of other types of crime represented here, sort of all happening at, well, a lot of them happening at similar prevalence. So vandalism, burglary, 8%, assaults and threats, 7% of premises were victims, and lower prevalence for the others, so fraud, vehicle offences and robbery at the bottom. So thinking about the frequency, so customer theft and assaults and threats had the highest frequency of victimisation. So for customer theft, 13% of all premises experienced instance of theft at least once a day. Assaults and threats also showing relatively high level of frequency, though not quite as high as customer theft, as you might expect. 24% experienced this type of crime at least once a month. Okay. So I mentioned that there's limited scope to break down our sample to look at subpopulations. But this is an example where we've combined the two latest years of survey data, and we've been able to break down the victimisation rates according to the sector that we're looking at. So you can see at the, oh, I keep pressing the wrong button, sorry. At the top here is the wholesale and retail sector, which had a higher rate of prevalence than most other sectors. Some of these differences are not statistically significant, so I think the two below are not statistically different from wholesale and retail, but the rest are. So I think that's probably something that everyone might think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, wholesale and retail being at the top of the list. Also, what we've been able to do with these combined years, because of the fact that wholesale and retail has appeared consistently throughout our sample over the last decade, is to piece together a time series. And in most cases, we can't do that because we haven't got the same sectors covered. But for wholesale and retail, we can, and that's shown over here. So looking at that chart, you see the top line represents all crime we cover in the commercial victimisation survey. And you can see after some reductions at the beginning of that time series, which starts in 2012, prevalence, which is what this shows here, has remained pretty steady, finishing up around that 40% mark that we've talked about. The bottom line is assaults. And again, that's remained pretty steady. There have been no statistically significant changes over that time. The line of interest here is the middle line with that big red box around it, and that's theft. And while the picture again is fairly steady there, the later period does show some significant increases, and that chimes pretty well with what we hear nowadays about large rises in shop theft. But it's helpful to see it here in the CVS time series, because we know that reporting of this type of crime is very low. So the police figures rising will be influenced by changes in reporting as well. So helps to add to the evidence picture in this area. Sorry, I appreciate I'm running pretty close to time, 5 minutes. Okay, so I'm just going to whip through some of these things a little bit quicker than I might otherwise have done. So we're able to delve in a little bit more detail with the 2-year data set as well. So I've picked out some data here relating specifically to retail. And I think there's a couple of points I wanted to flag. We've already talked about wholesale and retail having higher rates of crime prevalence than other sectors. And the crime prevalence in the retail sector shown there, it's on the bar chart. I'm not going to focus too much on that. The thing I wanted to focus on particularly with this slide is that when we talk about prevalence of theft being around the 34% mark, a lot of people might think, really? I mean, that, 34% of premises experiencing customer theft. And to me, when I first started looking at this, I thought it seems remarkably low. But I think that probably reflects the breadth of organisations that we've got in the retail sector. So, here we're surveying, anything from florists to supermarkets and department stores and everything in between. And the prevalence of crime will vary greatly across the retail sector. So we've been able to stretch our sample to the absolute limit here and break it down according to some different types of retail. The table below picks out some of these. So on the left, we've got supermarkets with prevalence of customer theft being just over 3/4 of premises, which kind of made a bit more sense to me when we break it down in that way. And much lower when we look at sort of, areas, clothing, 41%, household goods, 20% in respect to customer theft. So, important context in understanding the CVS data. So we're able to unpick a little bit about the nature of offences as well in the CVS. So I picked out a few things here. So this just shows types of items stolen most commonly. Top of the list, food and groceries makes sense in the context of supermarkets having that higher prevalence. Other things featuring quite high up on the list, clothing, alcohol, IT and electricals and cosmetics. Just really to show you the types of things that the survey is capturing. Similarly, we can say a bit about the nature of violent incidents. So just to remind you, we've got a prevalence rate across the whole sample of 7%. And here we've gone back to all businesses rather than retail. If we look at what's happening in those incidents, almost 3/4 or around the 70% mark, that's verbal abuse and threats. So that's the vast majority are in that kind of domain. However, there are physical attacks in there. Around 20% of premises violence victims experiencing violence without injury, and 8% with injury. We're also able to look at what initiated, what started that. In 20% of instances, it's around encountering a store thief. Slightly lower, customer complaints, or just generally confronting suspicious behaviour. Okay, so I'm going to skip over this one fairly quickly, but just really to say there's lots of other detail in the survey. We've got stuff around reporting and around perceptions of the police in there, and just sort of broader satisfaction with the service that the police provides. So just to flag that that's there. There's some detail in the slides which you'll have access to. So finally, just wrapping up. So looking ahead, what are the plans for the future in this area? So currently the CVS is out of contract. So there was no CVS run in 2024. And we're currently reviewing options for the future of the survey and research to gather evidence on crime against business premises. So why are we carrying out that review? There's a few reasons on the survey methods and the survey performance kind of side. Declining participation, survey response rates, the consistent theme here you'll have heard. Survey response rates falling in recent years, affecting the data quality. Telephone mode has proved increasingly challenging, so really difficult to get businesses to take part in a survey on the phone. Perhaps less businesses using the telephone with lots more online platforms. So we're needing to think a bit creatively, think about other modes and broader methods, and we're taking time to do that at the moment, and we'll be in touch with users about where we are with that. In the meantime, 2023 microdata are available via the data service, and great for people to make use of that. And I will wrap up there.